What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and today I'll be answering a question I've gotten a couple times over the last month or so and figured I'd do it before the character wipes come around with this next beta build. So today, I'll be telling you folks what I, if Shadowlands were to come out unchanged from right now, would be running for a Covenant, Conduits, Legendaries, and all that good stuff. Will my thinking be some innovative, world-shattering, super secret meta build? Probably not. However, you guys have been asking, so I figured I'd let you know, and maybe if I mention all this stuff, Blizzard will start changing things in the next beta build just to prove me wrong. So let's do this. Okay, so this is a pretty hypothetical video, as I of course expect more changes to occur every week before launch, and honestly probably for at least the first month or so after the expansion is released too, so these ideas aren't exactly set in stone and are just going off of how things are working in the current state of Shadowlands. This isn't a guide or anything either, as again, changes are still going on, so this is what I would pick as of right now if literally nothing changed. A quick heads up, I will be looking at all of this from the viewpoint of just Outlaw, as that is still my preferred spec despite doing as much content as I have been recently in Subtlety. Subtlety is fun, don't get me wrong, and the damage is quite good and all that. However, I am still pretty biased to Outlaw, but I do plan on playing all three specs in various content. So we'll get the low-hanging fruit out of the way first. Covenant choice. Yes, Necrolords, what a surprise. I'm curious if this answer will change in future builds on the beta and once this goes live, but yeah, it's just because of Serrated Bone Spike. It's still the only Covenant ability that is affected by Blade Flurry, which inherently means that it is fantastic for AoE purposes as Outlaw, and that means it's great for Mythic Plus, which is my favorite form of content. It also gives Outlaw a much needed damage over time effect so as not to lose 100% of uptime when dealing with mechanics, and it's an exceptionally efficient combo point generator. Even if they cut the damage of this move in half, it's still probably the most enjoyable to use Covenant ability of the bunch, albeit it can be a little bit of a GCD hog, which can feel a little odd at times. No surprises on this pick, but hey, we did say in the current state of the game, and as much as I want to flagellate the crap out of people as an edgy vampire pirate troll, it's kinda hard to say no to Blade Flurry being usable with Serrated Bone Spike. So next, Soulbinds. For Soulbind trees, I'm at a bit of a toss-up at the moment. I think for early in the expansion and raiding in general, I would pick Bonesmith Airmere, and for Mythic Plus, I'd choose Plague Divisor Maraleth. We'll start with Bonesmith Airmere, as I feel this one might be a surprise to some people. Okay, so I've mentioned in my other videos about Conduits and Soulbinds, and basically, a Soulbind is a unique talent tree with various paths. Each row in a Soulbind tree is unlocked at certain renown levels, which is basically kinda sorta like a reputation system specific for your Covenant. So as you can see on Bonesmith Airmere, within your first 3 conduit rows, you have 2 potency conduits. Potency conduits are the damage or healing throughput ones depending on your role. This is kind of a big deal because Outlaw has 2 pretty strong conduits, Triple Threat and Ambidexterity. Count the odds is kinda debatable at the moment, but Triple Threat and Ambidexterity are both quite strong. According to the current method tied to Renown, we'd also have our 3rd potency slot already by choosing Airmere. However, I'm actually more interested in this path to the right side of the tree, which would skip one of the potency conduits. On the 4th row of Airmere's Soulbind tree is an ability called Airmere's Arsenal, Marrowed Gemstone. After landing 10 critical strikes, you gain 20% increased critical hit chance for 20 seconds. This can only occur once per minute. Percentage increases like this are always a good thing, especially with the new secondary stat diminishing return scaling that will be present in Shadowlands. Critical Strike has historically been a good stat for Outlaw, then we'll know for sure exactly what our ideal priority stats are once we can sim things. This is honestly a pretty strong sounding option that gives us access to a second endurance conduit as well, meaning you'd be even more tanky if you took this path. The other option, Plague Divisor Maraleth, has a very interesting interaction with our Covenant ability Fleshcraft. Fleshcraft, for those who don't know, is basically a channeled absorb shield that you can use near enemy corpses for an even larger shield, maxing out at a shield that is 50% of your total health. That's kinda cool as an extra defensive, but what makes this thing really interesting is the Soulbind effect Volatile Solvent. This makes it so that you will gain certain buffs from absorbing various types of enemies while using your Fleshcraft ability. Probably the most impressive one at the moment comes from giving humanoids, which gives you around 350-ish mastery, which is a ton. On top of that, there are quite a lot of humanoid enemies in many of the dungeons, so this will be an easy buff to get on a regular basis. Most of the other ones are pretty underwhelming though. For a nice defensive boost, you can absorb an undead enemy, which will give you 5% of your maximum health whenever you kill an enemy while this buff is active, which isn't too shabby either. And Legendaries, those orange texted beauties. I'm extremely fond of the Guile Charm Legendary, as it really brings back the nostalgia and feeling of being a combat rogue still. This legendary is quite literally just the deep insight mechanic that combat rogues had prior to Legion, which means you can get a maximum of a 30% damage buff to all sources for 15 seconds after just spamming Sinister Strike a bunch, which is what we do anyhow. It's also one of the 2 most potent options in current simulations, so that's a win, as well as having great synergy with the triple threat Sinister Strike Conduit. Unfortunately, the big downside to this legendary power is that its source is from one of the 4 world bosses, Mortanus, meaning it might not be the very first legendary I make depending on the world boss rotation. If for some reason Guile Charm is a pain to get due to the world boss rotation, my second option will be Celerity, which comes from the Spires of Ascension dungeon in Bastion. However, the rest of this video will be under the pretense that I was able to get the Guile Charm legendary. So this will bring me to my talents. For the first time in a while, I'll probably be going with Weapon Master. Since there is a Sinister Strike focused Conduit and a Sinister Strike focused Legendary, it only makes sense to run the Sinister Strike talent. I'll of course be using the old reliable acrobatic strikes for extra blade flurry range and being able to tippy-toe around damaging abilities on the ground. Vigor is honestly playing quite nicely on the beta at lower item levels. However, I wouldn't be surprised if I switched to Deeper Stratagem due to all the extra combo points being generated via Serrated Bone Spike. Alacrity, unfortunately, is still the best option in the level 45 talent row, despite wanting Dreadblades to be a strong contender. Fingers crossed that because I mentioned that in this video, they'll do a tuning buff to it in the next build to prove me wrong. Lastly, I'll probably be using Blade Rush almost exclusively in all content. The reason being is that due to the changes made to Blade Flurry being on the cooldown reduction table for Restless Blades and True Bearing, Dancing Steel becomes a lot less useful. Even without Dancing Steel, it is very easy with decent Roll the Bones buffs to get Blade Flurry off cooldown before it's even expired. Blade Rush also works as a nice gap closer, an energy generator, and a currently uncapped AoE burst, which is kinda nice if you use it during Blade Flurry. Stat-wise, I don't really know what'll happen. Haste is apparently not looking that great at the moment in comparison to other stats, and the biggest downside to Serrated Bone Spike is that it cannot critically hit, which can very potentially make Critical Strike not as strong of a stat as it would normally be. Versatility is always a safe bet, and I have a strong hunch that Mastery will be a viable option with the addition of Slice and Dice being a baseline move which helps increase Man Gauche procs, as well as the new Ambidexterity Conduit which increases the likelihood of Man Gauche to proc while Blade Flurry is active, which as I just mentioned, Blade Flurry has an exceptionally high uptime. So there you have it folks, that's what I'd be doing at this exact moment if nothing were to change on the Shadowlands Beta in regards to tuning or anything at all. Probably not a super surprising result in the video, however I figured I could at least explain the reasoning behind a lot of these decisions for you all so as to help you know how some of these systems are interacting with each other. If you're new around here and like these sort of videos, I'd like to welcome you to come check out the rest of the channel. I do new uploads every weekday on a variety of content, with a lot of rogue-specific stuff, as well as other game system-specific things in WoW like professions, add-ons, weak ores, and all sorts of other stuff. I'd also like to take this time to thank all of my regular viewers, commenters, subscribers, and especially my patrons, for helping make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.